For years, we could not get our public officials to really make homelessness a priority.
Can't say Denver Mayor Mike Johnston isn't focused on his top issue, a homelessness state of emergency on day 2. But will it do anything? The people who threaten hospitals for supporting young trans people, they've scored another victory as a hospital here abandons some of that medical care. Bringing in the big brains to help a city decide where planting trees can do the most good.
Not only do we need more plants and living things around us, we need the right living things.
And speaking of what grows around us, the Colorado who planted these nearly 30 years ago did live to see today, the day they finally bloomed. That's tonight on Next. Denver is now under a declared emergency over homelessness. Mayor Mike Johnston did it on his second day in office. I mean, if it's that simple and it's actually going to do something to help, why didn't former Mayor Michael Hancock do it? Here's Marshall Zellinger.
Denver sidewalks will have to be clear of tents and encampments in order for Denver Mayor Mike Johnston to meet his most ambitious goal by the end of his 4-year term. His first policy announcement this morning was to declare homelessness a city emergency.
We want to get 1,000 people who are currently unhoused access to housing before the end of this calendar year.
In January 2022, the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative counted about 1,300 people unhoused on Denver streets during the point-in-time survey. 1,000 off the street in 6 months would be 75% toward Johnston's 4-year goal.
The ultimate goal is we want to have a city where no one has to sleep on the streets.
For years, we could not get our public officials to really make homelessness a priority. It was always an afterthought.
John Parvensky, who just retired as head of the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, said the coalition made an effort to have homelessness seen as an emergency with the previous administration.
Back in 2017, we asked Mayor Hancock to declare a state of emergency when we started seeing more and more encampments in our neighborhoods and our downtown areas. We looked at what San Diego was doing and set up some meetings inviting to fund the mayor to go out and visit.
That trip never happened.
The mayor was reluctant to do that. And by the time we got to 2020, we were in the COVID, and the public health emergency really became part and parcel of our response to homelessness.
In 2017, the city of San Diego declared a homelessness emergency in part due to a hepatitis A outbreak and full shelters. Johnston's emergency declaration was not because shelters are at capacity.
This entire focus is on people who are living outdoors, who are unsheltered, who are in encampments, who we think are at the greatest risk to themselves, and that we think pose a real opportunity for them to get back on their feet and for us to get back public sidewalks and spaces where all of the city has access.
I will point out, I tried to reach Hancock today through his former spokesman. I was told Hancock is on vacation, but the spokesman would send the message along with the caveat, I might not hear back, and as of now, I have not, and the former mayor has no obligation to respond. But hanging over today's declaration is this. Hancock could have done this and never did. So if it's successful, we'll wonder why he didn't. And if it's not successful, we can say, well, that's why.
1, the dude absolutely should be on vacation.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. 2, the idea of chronic unsheltered homelessness in Denver is it's not just about how do you get people out of it, but how do you stop so many people from coming into it on the front side? And that doesn't seem to be what the mayor was specifically focused on today.
Well, when you talk about the Emergency Operations Center being activated, then you're going to have people from multiple areas in the same room. I mean, picture when there's a storm or COVID. Yeah. You've got people from public health. You've got people representing hospitals. You have people from mental health, perhaps in the same room talking about how do we fix that problem and make sure that once they're off the street, they stay off the street. When you have the people in the same room, in a way, I guess he is talking about it.
All right. Marshall Zellinger, thank you. Young trans people looking for medical care have one less place to go in Colorado. This is a big win for the people who threaten those young people's existence. Children's Hospital Colorado has stopped performing gender-affirming surgeries. The hospital only did those surgeries for patients over the age of 18. It never provided those surgeries for minors. Their spokesperson says children's hospitals across the country have faced threats because they provide gender-affirming care. She says they've had to take steps to physically protect staff and patients. She did note there are other hospitals in the region that still offer that medical care. Transgender rights advocates wondered aloud to us today how long that's going to last.
And not only that, the precedence that they are setting is dangerous. And my fear is that other hospitals are also going to follow suit.
Hospital is going to continue to provide other types of gender-affirming care like hormone therapy, and patients there have told us they did get referrals so that they could go elsewhere for surgeries. The city of Denver says it cannot meet an environmental standard to keep cancer-causing chemicals out of stormwater because doing so would require the city to replace firefighting equipment at the airport. So the city is suing the state to avoid complying with the rule. This lawsuit is over what are called PFAS in water, those so-called forever chemicals. It was first reported on by our partners at the Denver Gazette. Common source of PFAS in water supply is firefighting foam. The city says even if the airport switched to PFAS-free foam, the new stormwater rules from the state would force them to throw out firefighting equipment that's contaminated with PFAS. Federal regulators have been looking at lower national limits on those chemicals. A study this month found that they're in nearly half of all drinking water sources in the U.S. All right, let's talk about how to cool down a city. Good conversation, right, on another near 100-degree day like this? The answer, trees. The right trees in the right places. Our Mark Salinger explains how Boulder's trying to do it.
There are few places to hide on a day like this.
Over a third of the people in the United States are actually living in extreme heat conditions today.
Yet if it weren't for the more than 600,000 trees around Boulder, the high of 94 would feel cool.
One of the things that we've realized is that trees matter a lot in terms of maintaining these kind of safe, livable urban settings.
Brett Kenkaren's job at the city is to figure out how to keep Boulder cool. The key is in the shade.
This is a tool called Tree Plotter Canopy. That's
Boulder just launched a website that shows tree canopy around the city and how it's changed over time, down to the specific address.
The house just to the south of me, not so good. They were at 19% canopy in 2015. They're at 12% now because they've lost some trees.
From here, Brett can figure out which communities need more trees, which ones have the least shade, and what types of trees would do best in certain spots.
And now I can start to see the difference in tree canopy across these kind of neighborhood areas. This is a kind of an example of one of the many trees along here that we had to take out.
Trees die. These left behind an empty space replaced by the sun.
We lost decades and decades of this grown infrastructure that we're going to now have to figure out how to replace as rapidly as we can, but it's going to take decades to do that.
Natural-based solutions will help Boulder survive rising temperatures for decades to come. Trees, quite literally, could save lives.
We are talking about the potential difference of 10 to 20 degrees of temperature difference in a city that has actually prepared itself and has grown out its natural infrastructure to prepare for this versus a city that has not. That's life or death differences.
Preparing today will help us hide in the shade for years to come.
Now, as we've recognized that climate change is going to happen, we also have to prepare ourselves to adapt and to figure out how to thrive in these difficult and more dangerous conditions.
So this website that shows the tree canopy is pretty astonishing to play around with. I'll show you right here. This is Boulder, and all these different colors of green show different canopy sizes in the city of Boulder. And you can zoom down here, if you live in Boulder right now, to each specific street, and then you can actually get even further down into each specific parcel of land to see what tree canopy looks like in your house alone. We looked at Brett's house earlier today, and he was telling us that, yeah, the tree canopy has gone down a little bit, and I asked him why, and he said, it's because they cut down a cottonwood tree. And that website showed between 2015 and 2021, he actually lost some percentage of tree cover. It's that accurate, which is insane.
It's easy to take shade and cooler temperatures for granted if you live or work in a tree-lined neighborhood. I mean, so Mark, what you're talking about really, though, is a shift beyond trees is just part of the natural world. And when you're planting trees with a strategy, I mean, they become part of like the built environment of a city.
Yeah, you and I and most people at home probably look at it as aesthetically pleasing to have trees on our street or where we go to school or wherever it might be. Cities like Boulder, like Brett there, are looking at it now as critical infrastructure almost to say, how do we cool down a city when temperatures like today are so hot?
Mark Salinger, really interesting stuff. Thank you, sir. 30,000 Coloradans will lose their health insurance coverage next month because the state is liquidating an insurance company called Friday Health Plans. First time the state has canned an insurer altogether since 2015. The Department of Insurance says Friday Health has kind of been limping along for a while. Financial trouble, slew of consumer complaints. These 30,000 customers are spread out across the state, and they're going to need to act quickly with their insurance running out at the end of August.
I would say get on it as soon as possible. The real concern is people having a gap in coverage or not being insured for the rest of the year. It's better to start things now and work with people who can help. Ask your questions now.
Most of the people insured by Friday Health were on individual plans, not through an employer. As of now, the only insurer that will honor Friday Health's deductibles is Kaiser. The state's directing all of the people impacted to go through either Connect for Health Colorado or a broker to find new coverage ASAP. Months after Colorado's legislators passed privacy protections for out-of-state patients seeking an abortion, the Biden administration is trying to do the same thing nationally. The Biden administration wants to update HIPAA laws to strengthen protection for reproductive health information. It would make it illegal for providers to share that info with, say, government officials who are investigating legal abortions and other reproductive care. There's some states where abortion is banned have come out against these protections, while Colorado's Democratic Attorney General Phil Weiser has joined 24 other states in pushing for those new protections. In April, our state legislature passed state-level privacy protections for abortion patients. That law also says Colorado is not going to participate with out-of-state investigations or lawsuits.
So they've been out here since around 96, 97, waiting to fully mature.
A plant I can personally identify with, only this one has finally done something worth watching. 3 decades to get to this moment. Yeah, it's tempting to blame the heat and the humidity. It could be saving us from even hotter days. That's next. It's dry heat, said absolutely no one today. The temperatures in the 90s and some of the highest humidity we've seen in years. So we got that combo of wet air from the Gulf of Mexico and the sun evaporating it into humidity. But it's really the humidity that kept most of Colorado below 100 yesterday. The trade-off, of course, is that the humidity raises the heat index, the feels-like temperature, so 96 degrees with a high dew point could certainly feel like 100 or better. And of course, it makes it harder on our bodies. Dr. Ben Usach, ER director with UC Health, says the humidity makes it tougher for the body to regulate its internal temperature through sweating.
Sweating is very important. It allows us to get all that excess heat off of our body. And that's the reason our environment is so much better than the more humid ones. Imagine trying to pour a glass of water into a full bucket of water. That's what you get in high humidity.
Yeah. That's what I got in high humidity, the doctor explained to me. We were joking last night, Danielle, about how it wasn't quite 100 in Denver, but it was for me because I was doing yard work.
And you were out there again today?
Yeah, and working a little bit harder, actually. So it got to 102 for me today.
Wow. Lucky you.
Informal survey, 102 degrees.
I'm pretty sure this is punishment. You were self-inflicting on yourself, being outside.
Punishment for poor choices, as often happens, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, officially out at DIA, it was 97 again. So we tied out at DIA, where we keep score, not Kyle's backyard, for the hottest day so far of the year. Mid to upper 90s into northern Colorado. It was toasty after the eastern plains there. The triple digits around Pueblo, Trinidad, Grand Junction too. You can see the heat advisory still stretching across the southern tier of the U.S. Also parts of south central Colorado still included in that heat advisory until 9 o'clock tonight. We saw temperatures again down there, certainly in the triple digits. Tonight, well, we're watching a couple of little gusty thunderstorms pushing across the state. Certainly up in the high country when we had one round roll in about 4 or 5 o'clock. Put down a little bit of lightning. You were lucky if you saw a couple of raindrops, and now everything fading off in the distance out east. As we go throughout the next couple of hours, we're going to start to see things wind down just a bit. Scattered storms, however, remain up in the high country. This is late tonight, about 11, midnight. Might even find one shower overnight here in Denver. Tomorrow morning, you'll wake up to a few clouds. Might be a little muggy, but temperatures will be a bit cooler for us tomorrow, and that's going to be the trend for the rest of the week. Here we are about 2 o'clock, storms brewing on the south side of town, and then by about 6 o'clock when we see you back here tomorrow, we'll be tracking another round of those gusty storms that just drop a bit of lightning, a little bit of light rain, and then they're long gone. Chance for seeing a couple of them turn severe, dropping some decent hail. That's going to be across the eastern plains for us. Upper 80s, low 90s. How about that? Yes, little cool front's going to help to slowly but surely knock these temperatures back down. Low 80s on Thursday. That's going to be our stormiest day for the work week. Back to the mid 80s. Isolated storms looking pretty good for Friday. And then the 90-degree heat, it is back as we look ahead toward the weekend and beyond.
And this year there are 2 of them. And so it's like my dad's legacy continues.
They say you plant a tree for the next generation. Apparently that goes for Agave too. Her father put it in the ground 3 decades ago. She gets to see it bloom. Nearly 30 years ago, a gardener at CU Boulder decided to play the long game. He planted agave, which can take decades to bloom.
In its lifetime. So this plant, you can see it's turning to brown. Once it blooms, it's going to die because it's not putting energy to the leaves, it's putting all the energy to the flowers. Yeah, when you get down here, it looks much more taller. Yeah. Much larger. We've had a lot of people coming by just to observe, look, ask questions, and so it's been enjoyable to get out and talk with the community. Agaves are typically pollinated by bats as a common pollinator. We're looking at one of our blooming agave here in the Western Garden at CU Boulder. It took, let's see, about 27, so nearly 30 years for this plant to fully mature and bloom.
To be here when this is basically blooming once every 30 years is remarkable.
These plants were put in here about 96, 97 by Alan Taylor. He was a professor here at the university, but he had planted these. He had a passion for plants.
They are an awesome, awesome plant. This plant is really special to me because my dad, who is this amazing horticulturist, planted them when I was a kid. And he didn't think he was going to get to see them blossom in his lifetime. He passed away in December, so he got to see one last year that bloomed. He would want to race down here and he would be taking photos. Last year he took like 20 photos of the one that was blooming.
He got excited about plants. He really enjoyed plants. He would be excited to see that 2 of them were blooming at the same time out of the garden.
So this is just one more thing that, you know, makes sure that his legacy lives on. Well, my dad said to me when he saw that one blooming, he said, I never thought in my lifetime I was going to see at least one of them bloom.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that he got to see that one.
So we have some offspring of that. It's those I probably will not ever see bloom. It's not something that blooms every year. It blooms once in its lifetime. So once it blooms, it's done. Right.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for swinging by.
John says anybody who wants to see the agave plants can pop by the 30th Street Greenhouse, the 30th Street Greenhouse in Boulder. You're going to want to do it quickly. They'll only be in bloom for the next few weeks. We'll finish with your feedback next. Tons of feedback tonight about Denver Mayor Mike Johnston's announced plan today to begin tackling the homelessness epidemic in our city. Mark writes in to say, it's great, it's a concrete goal, he's going to present a plan, give him a chance. I feel like give him a chance is a pretty good theme for any mayor who's in, say, their first week on the job. Steve writes in to say, what do we know about these people? I'm sure he didn't mean like those people, but what do we know about these people? How long have they been in Denver? Where'd they come from? How many migrants are among them? So Steve, what we know from the previous point in time surveys of people experiencing homelessness is that the majority of them are Coloradans, like they have been here for some time. That can be a persistent thing to kind of get out of your head, the idea that people are flocking here from around the country. Jay Wolf writes in to say, wouldn't this just encourage other homeless folks to move here if we solve the problem? So interestingly, Jay, our sister station in Portland took a look at what they've done there. Obviously, they have a national reputation as it relates to the issue of homelessness. And what they found is that in the years that perception increased nationwide, they saw fewer people moving in without a home. See you next time.